DemocracyNow, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we turn to part 2 of the United States of ALEC, a special report by Bill Moyers. It's airing this weekend on Moyers Company, but is premiering today here on Democracy Now!
The most important business happens in what ALEC calls task forces. There are currently 8 of them, with a corporate take on every important issue in American life, from health and safety to the environment to taxation. In ALEC task forces, elected state officials and corporate representatives close the doors to press and public, and together approve the bills that will be sent out to America. But Americans have no idea they come from ALEC unless someone like a Mark Pocan exposes it.
When I went down to New Orleans to the ALEC convention last August, I remember going to a workshop and hearing a little bit about a bill they did in Florida and some other states. And there was a proposal to provide special needs scholarships. And lo and behold, all of a sudden I come back to Wisconsin, and what gets introduced? Get ready, I know you're going to have shock look on your face. A bill to do just that.
26 ALEC members in the Wisconsin legislature sponsored that special needs bill, but the real sponsor was ALEC. Pocan knew because the bill bore a striking resemblance to ALEC's model. Have a look. But Pocan isn't only concerned that ALEC sneaks bills into the state legislature. The intent behind the bills troubles him too.
Some of their legislation sounds so innocuous, but when you start to read about why they're doing it, you know there's a far different reason why something's coming forward, and that's important. If the average person knew that a bill like this came from some group like ALEC, you look at the bill very differently, and you might look at that legislator a little differently about why they introduced it. This is not about education. This is not about helping kids with special needs. This is about privatization. This is about corporate profits, and this is about dismantling public education.
The bill passed in the Wisconsin House, but failed to make it through the Senate. However, in its education report card, ALEC boasts that similar bills have passed in Oklahoma, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Ohio. ALEC's education agenda includes online schooling as well. Take a careful look, and you'll find the profit motive there, too.
What you see is corporations that have a direct benefit, whose bottom line directly benefits from these bills, voting on these bills in the ALEC task force. And so corporations like Connections Academy, corporations like K-12, they have a direct financial interest in advancing this agenda.
Those corporations, Connections Academy and K-12, which specialize in online education, can profit handsomely from laws that direct taxpayer money toward businesses like theirs. In 2011, both sat on ALEC's education task force. But the two companies didn't just approve the model bill, they helped craft it. The proof is in one of ALEC's own documents. And there's more to the story.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1030 has to do with the establishment of virtual public schools.
Last year, an online schooling bill based on the ALEC model turned up in another state where ALEC has a powerful influence, Tennessee. It was introduced in both the state Senate and House by ALEC members. The bill passed, making private corporations eligible for public money for online education. Then, within weeks, the K-12 corporation got what amounted to a no-bid contract to provide online education to any Tennessee student from kindergarten through the 8th grade. So, let's review. The ALEC member corporations helped craft the bill. ALEC legislators introduce it and vote on it, and now there's a state law on the books that enables one of those corporations to get state money. Game, set, match. But remember, this story isn't about one company in the education industry and one law in Tennessee. It's about hundreds of corporations in most every industry, influencing lawmakers in state after state using ALEC as a front. Here's another example. The American Bail Coalition, which represents the bail bond industry, pulls no punches about writing ALEC's model bills itself. In a newsletter a few years back, the coalition boasted that it had written 12 ALEC model bills fortifying the commercial bail industry. Here's Jerry Watson, senior legal counsel for the coalition, speaking at an ALEC meeting in 2007. He has a law to offer.
There is a model bill for you to review if you might be interested in introducing such a measure.
He'll even help legislators amend it.
Now, if you don't like the precise language of these suggested documents, can they be tweaked by your legislative counsel? Well, absolutely. And will we work with them on that and work with you and your staff on that? Absolutely.
All the lawmakers have to do is ring him up.
There is a phone number there for our executive offices in Washington, D.C. We're prepared to help you and your staff and support this legislation in any way that we can.
And guess what? There's gold at the end of the rainbow.
But I'm not so crazy as not to know that you've already figured out that if I can talk you into doing this bill, my clients are going to make some money on the bond premiums.
And corporate interest conflated with the public interest.
If we can help you save crime victims in your legislative district and generate positive revenue for your state and help solve your prison overcrowding problem, you don't mind me making $1.
ALEC members are seldom as upfront as the American Bail Coalition. In fact, ordinarily ALEC's hand is very hard to see at all. But if you know where to look, you'll often find ALEC hiding in plain sight.
ALEC has, in addition to its regular vacation resort trips, it also has special, what it calls boot camps on particular substantive issues.
In March 2011, ALEC held one of those boot camps for legislators at the North Carolina Capitol in Raleigh. The subject was so-called tort reform, how to keep the average Joe from successfully suing a corporation for damages. The day after the boot camp, 2 state representatives presented the draft version of a House bill chock full of ALEC priorities. It would, among other things, limit corporate product liability in North Carolina. One of the representatives, Jonathan Ryan, was quoted in the Raleigh News Observer saying of ALEC, "I really don't know much about them." That's odd, because Ryan had been listed as a featured speaker at the ALEC Tort Reform Boot Camp. The paper also reported that Ryan said the bill wasn't copied from ALEC model legislation. That too is odd, given how the sections covering product liability could have passed as twins. The bill was controversial. It passed, but only after the product liability sections were taken out of it. But the tort reformers didn't give up. They were back a year later, this time with a draft bill aimed specifically to limit the liability of drug manufacturers. When the public was allowed to comment before a legislative panel, people who had lost loved ones came to testify against the bill. A son who had lost a father.
You know, my dad's gone. All I can do is sit here and be a voice for him. He can't speak any longer. Emotional and
A grandfather mourning his granddaughter.
if this bill passes, an innocent victim in North Carolina like Brittany could not hold a manufacturer accountable. Everyone needs to be accountable for their actions.
Unmentioned to those in the room, ALEC was present too, in the form of a lobbyist with drug manufacturing giant GlaxoSmithKline. His name is John Del Giorno.
Several of the opposing testifiers today brought up very compelling, sad, empathetic stories about...
Not only is Glaxo an ALEC corporate member, Del Giorno himself is also a vice chairman of ALEC's National Private Enterprise Board. The North Carolina bill has been tabled for now. So now you've seen how it works for corporations. How about for the politicians?
Last night was, as the president finally acknowledged today, a shellacking. Republicans gained control of the House, picking up 60 seats so far.
When all of the returns were counted on election night 2010, ALEC was a big winner. 8 of the Republican governors elected or re-elected that night had ties to the group.
Guess what? I'm going to be governor of Ohio!
There's going to be a lot of news.
and a lot of observers that say that we made history.
A clean sweep for Republicans.
And a star was born that election night. Wisconsin's new governor, a son of ALEC named Scott Walker.
Wisconsin is open for business.
I've known Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, for the better part of 20 years. And Scott is a classic career politician. I don't say that in a negative way.
Part of it, but
Journalist and Wisconsinite John Nichols has tracked Scott Walker's career since the 90s, when Walker was a state legislator and an ALEC member.
And in 2010, he ran not presenting himself as an ALEC alumni or as an ally of big corporations or big business people outside the state. He ran a very down-home campaign.
This is my lunch. I pack a brown bag each day so I can save some money to spend on, the more important things in life, like sending my kids to college.
Nichols says that despite the folksy image, in the years leading up to Walker's 2010 campaign, he had become a master political fundraiser.
And he began to really forge incredibly close ties with a lot of corporate interests that he had first been introduced to in ALEC, individuals and groups like the Koch brothers.
David and Charles Koch, the billionaire businessmen behind a vast industrial empire, are also political activists with an agenda. Their companies and foundations have been ALEC members and funders for years.
The Koch brothers were among the 2 or 3 largest contributors to Scott Walker's campaign for governor of Wisconsin. And the Koch brothers get that if you really want to influence the politics of this country, you don't just give money to presidential campaigns. You don't just give money to congressional campaign committees. The smart ones, the smart players, put their money in the states.
Hi, I'm Scott Walker.
It's state government that funds education, social services, and it taxes.
If you want lower taxes and less government, I'm Scott Walker, and I know how to get the job done.
And so the smart donors can change the whole country without ever going to Washington, without ever having to go through a congressional hearing, without ever having to lobby on Capitol Hill, without ever having to talk to a president.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
The new governor moved quickly with a raft of ALEC-inspired bills. They included one similar to Florida's Stand Your Ground. Another made it easier to carry concealed weapons. There was a resolution opposing the mandated purchase of health insurance, and of course, there was one limiting corporate liability. The Wisconsin legislature passed a so-called tort reform measure that included parts of 8 different ALEC models. ALEC was elated, praising Walker and the legislature in a press release for their, quote, immediate attention to reforming the state's legal system. But Scott Walker was also shooting for another big ALEC prize.
Now, some have questioned why we have to reform collective bargaining.
Taking away workers' collective bargaining rights. That had long been an ALEC goal. A candid video caught Scott Walker talking about it with one of his financial backers, the billionaire businesswoman Diane Hendricks.
We're going to start in a couple weeks with our budget adjustment bill. The first step is we're going to deal with collective bargaining for all public employee unions, because you divide and conquer.
Despite an extraordinary public outcry,
this is not just a rule.
And after a brief but intense political struggle, Walker's anti-collective bargaining measures became state law.
It was ALEC's ideas, ALEC's values that permeated the bill and undid almost 50 years, more than 50 years of collective bargaining law in Wisconsin.
But again, remember, this isn't just about one state. It's about every state. Take Arizona. It's practically an ALEC subsidiary. One report this year found that 49 of the state's 90 legislators are members, and 2/3 of the Republican leadership are on ALEC task forces. And of course, the governor, Jan Brewer, was an ALEC member too. So, not surprising, Arizona is among the states passing ALEC-inspired laws to privatize education at taxpayer expense. And no surprise again, Arizona is also getting ALEC-like laws to limit corporate liability.
Police will also be able to ask anyone to prove their legal status.
And Arizona, you'll recall, made news in 2010 with a law allowing police to stop someone for looking Hispanic and detaining them if they weren't carrying proper papers. So it probably won't shock you to learn that Arizona's immigration law also inspired an ALEC model, a version of which was passed in 5 other states.
All of us here are very familiar with ALEC and the influence that ALEC has with many of the members here.
ALEC's nomination of Arizona proved too much for State Representative Steve Farley.
I just want to emphasize, it's fine for corporations to be involved in the process. Corporations have the right to present their arguments, but they don't have the right to do it secretly. They don't have the right to lobby people and not register as lobbyists. They don't have the right to take people away on trips, convince them of them, send them back here, and then nobody's seen what's really going on and how that legislator has gotten that idea and where is it coming from.
Farley has introduced a bill to force legislators to disclose their ALEC ties, just as the law already requires them to do with any lobbyist.
All I'm asking in the ALEC Accountability Act is to make sure that all of those expenses are reported as if they are lobbying expenses, and all those gifts that legislators received are reported as if they are receiving the gifts from lobbyists, so the public can find out and make up their own minds about who's influencing what.
Steve Farley's bill has gone nowhere. ALEC, on the other hand, is still everywhere, still hiding in plain sight. Watch for it, coming soon to a state house near you.
The United States of ALEC, a special report by Bill Moyers. It will air this weekend on Moyers Company. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.